Today near-death experience was from an ex-Muslim. Hi, my name is Ramsey. I was born into a devout Muslim family. From an early age, my life was steeped in the teachings of Islam. My father, a respected imam, ensured that we observed all the rituals and prayers diligently. I remember waking up before dawn to perform Fajr, the first prayer of the day, and reciting verses from the Quran with my siblings. Our lives revolved around the mosque, and I was taught that our faith was the cornerstone of our existence. My mother, a kind and gentle woman, also played a significant role in my religious upbringing. She would tell us stories from the Quran about the prophets and their unwavering faith in Allah. These stories fascinated me and instilled a deep sense of devotion in my heart. By the age of 7, I had memorized several surahs, and I took great pride in leading prayers at home when my father was away. As I grew older, the challenges of life began to weigh heavily on me. My family, despite our religious fervor, was not wealthy. We lived modestly, and I often felt the pangs of envy when I saw others who seemed to have more than we did. My biggest struggle, however, was internal. Despite my outward devotion, I often found myself questioning the very faith I was brought up in. Doubts crept into my mind, especially during my teenage years. I would wonder about the existence of God and the purpose of our rituals. These thoughts terrified me because I knew that such doubts were considered sinful. At school, I excelled academically but found it hard to fit in socially. My peers often teased me for being overly pious, and I felt isolated. My inner turmoil grew, and I began to feel like an outsider in my own community. To cope, I buried myself deeper into my studies and religious practices, hoping that my doubts would eventually vanish. Despite my internal struggles, I remained committed to Islam. I knew that abandoning my faith would mean losing my family and community. To prove my devotion, I decided to pursue Islamic studies after high school. I enrolled in a madrasa where I immersed myself in the study of the Quran, Hadith, and Islamic jurisprudence. During this time, I became more active in my community, leading prayers and teaching younger children about Islam. I wanted to be an example of a true Muslim, hoping that my actions would suppress my doubts. I even considered becoming an imam like my father, believing that a higher level of religious commitment would solidify my faith. But the more I delved into Islamic teachings, the more questions arose. The rigidity of the doctrines and the lack of room for personal interpretation troubled me. I struggled to reconcile the merciful God I believed in with the harsh punishments prescribed for apostasy and questioning faith. On the 14th of April 2023, I was making my way back home from the madrasa. I had just finished an intense study session and was eager to get home. As I turned the corner near our house, I heard a commotion coming from a nearby market stall. Curious, I walked over to see what was happening. A crowd had gathered around a man who had collapsed on the ground. He was clutching his chest and gasping for breath. Without thinking twice, I pushed my way through the crowd to help. I had some basic first aid training and hoped I could assist until proper medical help arrived. As I knelt beside the man and tried to calm him, I felt a sudden, sharp pain in my own chest. It was as if a heavy weight had been placed on me and I struggled to breathe. The pain intensified rapidly, spreading through my body like wildfire. I tried to call out for help, but my voice was weak and drowned out by the noise of the crowd. My vision blurred and I felt myself slipping into darkness. In those final moments, everything seemed to slow down. The world around me grew distant, and the sounds of the crowd faded into a muffled background hum. I was acutely aware of the pain, but more than that, a profound sense of fear and confusion gripped me. Was this the end? What would happen to me now? My thoughts raced, jumping from one fear to another, until they were abruptly silenced. The transition was sudden and surreal. One moment, I was lying on the dusty ground, gasping for breath, and the next, I found myself floating above the scene. I could see my own body below me, lifeless and still. The crowd was in a frenzy trying to revive me, but I knew it was too late. I was no longer tethered to that physical form. A strange, chilling sensation enveloped me, and I felt myself being pulled away from the scene. It was as if an unseen force was dragging me through a tunnel faster than I could comprehend. The tunnel was dark and foreboding, with whispers and distant screams echoing around me. I tried to resist, to fight against the pull, but it was futile. The force was too strong and I was powerless to stop it. As I was pulled through the dark tunnel, my initial feelings were a mix of fear and disbelief. The sensation of floating above my lifeless body had been jarring enough, but now, as I was dragged towards an unknown destination, a profound dread took hold of me. The darkness was oppressive, and the whispers that echoed around me filled me with a deep sense of foreboding. It felt as though I was being watched by countless unseen eyes, each one judging and condemning me. The pain that had consumed me in my final moments on earth was gone, replaced by a cold numbness that seeped into my very being. I could feel the weight of my actions and the life I had lived pressing down on me, a heavy burden that I could not shake off. My senses were heightened in this strange state, every sound was amplified, every whisper was clear, and the darkness seemed to pulse with a life of its own. I tried to focus, to understand what was happening to me, but the more I tried, the more disoriented I became. My mind raced with questions, but there were no answers, only an overwhelming sense of doom. I knew that whatever awaited me at the end of this journey was not going to be pleasant. Suddenly, the tunnel ended, and I was thrust into a new and terrifying reality. The transition was abrupt, and I found myself standing in a vast, barren land. As I looked around, the full horror of my situation began to sink in. I had arrived in hell, a place of unimaginable torment and suffering. The cries of agony and despair that filled the air were unlike anything I had ever heard. They were the screams of souls in eternal torment, each one a testament to the pain and suffering that awaited me. The landscape was dotted with figures writhing in agony, their bodies twisted and contorted by the torments inflicted upon them. Demonic beings moved among them, inflicting pain and suffering with a sadistic glee. These creatures were grotesque and terrifying, their forms constantly shifting and changing. Their eyes burned with a malevolent fire, and their laughter was a chilling reminder of the cruelty that existed in this place. As I stood there, paralyzed by fear, one of the demons approached me. I screamed, but my voice was lost in the cacophony of cries that filled the air. The demon dragged me across the burning ground, and I knew that my torment was about to begin. Every moment in this place felt like an eternity, and I could feel my soul being consumed by the despair and suffering that surrounded me. I realized with a sinking heart that there was no escape, no respite from the pain that awaited me. As the demon dragged me deeper into this infernal realm, the path to hell revealed itself in all its horrifying detail. The ground beneath us was a mixture of jagged rocks and molten lava, glowing with an eerie, hellish light. Each step sent searing pain through my body, the heat from the lava licking at my feet and legs, yet I could not stop moving. The air was thick with smoke and ash, making it difficult to breathe, and the stench of sulfur was overwhelming. The landscape was a twisted, nightmarish version of the world I had known. Rivers of fire flowed like blood through the cracked earth, and mountains of smoldering ash loomed in the distance. Along the path, I began to encounter other souls, each one trapped in their own personal nightmare. Their faces were with pain and despair, their bodies twisted and broken by the tortures they endured. Some were chained to the ground, writhing in agony as demonic creatures tormented them with cruel implements. Others were forced to wander aimlessly, their eyes vacant and hollow, their spirits crushed by the weight of their suffering. As I was dragged past them, I could see the terror in their eyes, a reflection of the fear that consumed me. They were lost, just as I was, condemned to an eternity of torment with no hope of redemption. As the demon dragged me further into the depths of hell, I was subjected to torments beyond my worst nightmares. The pain was relentless and excruciating, attacking every part of my being. My body was seared by flames that seemed to burn from the inside out, leaving my skin blistered and charred. The heat was unbearable, a constant, agonizing presence that left no room for relief. The demonic beings that populated this infernal realm were horror and malevolent. These demons were relentless in their torment. They would tear at my flesh with claws like iron, their laughter echoing through the air as they inflicted pain. They whispered lies and taunts, feeding on my fear and despair. Their touch was a searing agony, each encounter leaving me more broken and defeated. One particularly horrifying demon seemed to take a personal interest in me. It was massive, with skin like molten rock and eyes that burned with an unholy fire. It would approach me, its voice a deep, resonant growl that sent shivers down my spine. "You are here because of your own failings," it would say, its words dripping with venom. "You could have chosen differently, but now you are ours. You rejected the way, we will show you the way of torment till eternity from now." I saw souls engulfed in flames, their screams piercing the air as their bodies were consumed by the unending fire. Some were chained to burning rocks, their flesh melting and reforming in a never-ending cycle of agony. Others were tormented by demonic beings, their bodies twisted and broken by the relentless assaults. One soul, a woman not much older than myself, was being flayed alive by a demon with razor-sharp claws. Her skin was torn from her body in strips, her cries of pain echoing through the air. Yet, even in her torment, I could see the same despair and regret in her eyes that I felt in my own soul. As I moved through this hellish landscape, I noticed a particular segment where the torment seemed especially brutal. The souls here were subjected to even more horrific punishments. I was drawn closer, though I couldn't understand why. It was as if some unseen force was guiding me to witness this specific torment. Unlike the other souls, I wasn't tormented physically, but I could feel their horror and pain deeply within me. It was an overwhelming sense of empathy and dread, as if their suffering was being imprinted on my very essence. I watched in horror as the demons inflicted their cruel punishments. One demon, particularly so frightening with fiery eyes and jagged teeth, was tormenting a woman. I heard him say, "Your other ignorant type who took the vaccine will soon join you as time elapses." The demon's words shocked me to my core. I knew the vaccine had saved many lives and was still saving lives. Many churches had advised their members to take the vaccine, believing it was a gift from God to combat a deadly disease. Hearing this demon's words was alarming and confusing. I couldn't understand why people who took the vaccine would be condemned to such a fate. As I stood there, paralyzed by the horror of what I was witnessing, I felt a deep, unrelenting sorrow. Tears streamed down my face as I cried bitterly, pleading for mercy for these tormented souls. The sight of their suffering was unbearable, and I felt utterly helpless. In the midst of my despair, a radiant light pierced the darkness. It was a light of such brilliance and purity that the demons immediately recoiled and fled, making way for the being who emerged from it. I couldn't see his face, but his presence was overwhelming, filling me with an indescribable sense of peace and hope. The torment and despair that had gripped my heart vanished in his presence. The being walked towards me and called me by name, his voice gentle yet powerful. He spoke directly to my confusion and contemplation about the vaccine. "Those who are in hell are not here because they took the vaccine," he said. "They are here because they allowed the influence of the vaccine to push them away from the way. They wandered from God's path and continued in sin. The vaccine itself was not the cause, but the choices they made afterwards." I understood then that it wasn't the act of taking the vaccine that condemned these souls, but their subsequent actions and loss of faith. The being did not reveal who had influenced the vaccine, but he made it clear that the true issue was the soul's separation from God. It then dawned on me, remembering what I know, or should I say heard about the fact that these vaccines have hidden demonic plans that is not known by the masses. It also dawned on me that the vaccine were intended to vaccinate and lure men from God by its influence. I don't know how it's made to drag a man from God's path though. As soon as he finished speaking, the being of light began to fade. The peace and joy that accompanied his presence started to dissipate, and the oppressive darkness of hell began to close in once more. I felt a profound sense of loss as he left. As the brilliant white light receded, I felt a force yanking me back. It was as if an invisible hand had reached down and grabbed hold of my very soul, pulling me upwards with a strength I could not resist. The heat and screams began to fade, replaced by a growing sense of coolness and calm. The light began to break through the darkness, and I found myself floating towards it, drawn by an unseen power. I opened my eyes to find myself in this hospital room, alive. The doctors later told me that I was incredibly lucky to be alive. They had found me just in time, and despite the attack, they managed to save me. But I knew that my survival was more than just luck. I had been given a second chance, a chance to make things right. After my recovery, I gave my life to Jesus Christ. It came with a lot of challenges, but I trust God. With time, I will share my persecution experiences. Hebrews 10 verses 24 to 25 reminds us, "And let us consider how we may spur one another on toward love and good deeds, not giving up meeting together, as some are in the habit of doing, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day approaching." This passage highlights the vital role we play in each other's lives, inspiring and uplifting one another in love and good works. When we gather, we build a support system that helps us stay strong in our faith, especially during trying times. Remember, beloved, God loves you deeply and is with you always. Stay connected to your faith community, and let the love and encouragement of fellow believers strengthen you on your journey. Thank you. If you are blessed with this, kindly share with your friends and family, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. God bless you.